Hi there, and Happy New Year. I'm going to talk about NE for a couple of minutes. The reason being I've read on Reddit and seen elsewhere some descriptions of NE that I believe are not entirely accurate, and so I was hoping to provide sort of a point of view that both pulls the lens further out for a broader viewpoint and also pushes it in for some of my personal experiences, with the caveat that your mileage may vary when it comes to pulling the lens in for a close-up. So, what is NE? From the general level, I would say that it's things such as thinking about the future, being future-focused, the idea of ideation and brainstorming, and also more broadly, novelty, the search for novelty in the space of ideas. That is, as opposed to repeatable things that you are looking, that your mind is more quickly apt to pick up on generating its own ideas as opposed to looking to repeat existing ideas. So I will add a quick admonishment here, a mild one. That is, if you believe that you have intuition on at or near top stack, first or second function, you should be able to describe to some degree what that experience is like. Yes, intuition itself is an unconscious function, that is, the inner workings are a black box, but there are inputs and outputs to that black box. There are situations where you use that function, and there is some empirics that you can stand up around this to understand, like, what is it that I'm kicking in, that I'm doing when I do this stuff that most other people don't do. And it does become pretty clear to folks who've lived with extroverted intuition top stack, that it is stuff that a lot of other people don't really do. You sort of feel a little bit like, odd person out. And I think that's where, to get sidetracked, that a lot of the FI-NE folks end up being Enneagram type 4, because it's sort of like, I'm doing something different from other people, and I feel that this gives me a weird feeling, and therefore I think that, I don't fit in. But anyway, all that aside, back to the main point. So ideation, novelty, or the search for novelty, using ideas. Let's pull the lens in a little bit closer. A lot of what NE ends up instantiating are things like analogy. So, for instance, trying to describe a moving target, you might say, under SI, to use the expression, well, move the goalposts, or the goalposts are being moved. But with NE, you might say, for instance, like, well, look, it's like you've got an artillery piece and you're trying to aim at a target, but the target's moving, and we've got to make sure that it's pointed in the right direction before we fire so that we can hit its intended point. That's more of NE saying, let's make this overly complicated and try and bring in a way of describing this that drives home the point with words and images. So that's sort of if you do this and use metaphor frequently in your manner of speaking with people, then it's likely that you have NE higher up in your stack, because you're trying to say, well, look, it's like this, to try and drive home a point, because the point itself may not somehow be perceived as adequate, or you need some sort of novelty around that. You need to introduce a new way of discussing this to make it, to convey the feeling that you have behind it, if you are FI-NE or NE-FI. So moving in yet another step to this black box, I would describe the individual cases of instantiating NE, in my case, to be a little bit like pulling stuff out of a stream of garbage. And there's like this constant flow of idiocy that's going by, and you sort of just randomly grab into it. It isn't really random. There is a black box in there somewhere, but it feels random that you're sort of grabbing in it and pulling stuff out. It's like, oh, rubber ducky with 2 heads. Oh, it's a gear with 13 teeth made out of bronze. Oh, it's a book that I read 25 years ago, but it's the Spanish translation. What does any of this mean? I mean, with grabbing enough stuff out of that garbage stream, you sort of figure there's going to be something that's useful that you get out of that. Or there's some connections like, oh, the gear with 13 cogs in this book that's translated in Spanish was something about engineering. Therefore, I can put these 2 ideas together and talk about this concept of engineering in bronze in Spanish, maybe. But you get the idea. It is sort of this constant mashing up of ideas and then reworking them. With FI, it's on the plane of introverted feeling as a judging function. So you end up then with something like talking about the salamander that you befriended that lived under the porch, that you would feed breadcrumbs after lunch every day. But then fall came along and the leaves started turning and things got colder and your salamander went into hibernation and you never saw him again. Right. I mean, it's just this constant stream of ideation. Now, it is not experiences themselves. It's the ideas that are behind the experiences, but it is, in its own sense, drastically important to have SE experiences as part of that FI-NE or any SI axis stack, because the SE experiences get fed into SI, and SI is the thing that you draw from in order to make NE work. So at the end of the day, that book in Spanish from 20 years back, that's an actual thing, except you haven't seen this, but you know about Spanish, and you know about books, and you know about bronze, and you know about cogs. And so these are all SI objects that you're pulling in for your mashup. And the more objects and the more sensory stuff that you've managed to ingest through SE, no matter how crappy bad your SE is, to get into SI, the more of a base you have to work from. So that's where, it is important to have lots of experiences interacting with the world, with people, because all of that ends up becoming relevant to building up a bigger base of experience that you can then recombine in powerful new ways. So anyway, that's a description of NE. I hope some of this may resonate with you. Final thought is that this garbage stream, this whole idea of all these things I described, yes, they may resonate. Is it a constancy in your life? Because I can describe, like, while going downstairs making tea, some mornings just my brain is just going zoom, 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 zoom. It's this maelstrom of garbage that is, for the most part, useless. But, you're sort of like constantly trying to catch stuff in it, and most of it just falls through your fingers because it's completely useless. But every now and then there's an idea that hopefully gets retained to an extent. Unfortunately, precious few, because most of that is always like, well, I can always ideate something new. So there you have it, some thoughts on NE. I hope they're helpful for you, and I wish you all a happy new year.